Hi guys, and welcome to another episode. As promised, I am going to begin the CNC series that many of you have asked for. Today, we're going to start from the very beginning. As if you know nothing about CNC, you don't know what a CNC mill is, and I'm going to assume that you don't know what a CNC lathe is. This may not apply to some people, it may apply to some people. But today what I want to do is give you a basic overview, and there again, this is the first steps. I'm going to give you a basic overview of what a CNC mill is and what a CNC lathe is and the functions of both. To do that, I'm going to go into the shop area. I'll have to change locations, but I'm going to the shop area and I will show you in real time the CNC mill, one of the ones that I use, and the CNC lathe that I currently use, and I'll explain the basics of both, and then in the next video we'll start digging a little deeper into it. But this is where we should really begin, and again, I am going to act and treat it like you know nothing at all about CNC, period. I'm doing this because I have to cater to everybody. So if you do know something about CNC, you may want to skip to the next video. If you want to start from the beginning and learn from the beginning, this is going to be the video for you. So let me relocate and I'll get back with you in just a second. Okay, I'm back. I am resituated in the shop, showing one of the CNC machines that I currently use. I have laid a cue on the CNC machine to give you a size reference, because sometimes it's hard to kind of gauge the size just by looking at a photo or a video. Now, we're going to start by explaining the machine itself, and here again, I'm going to treat this like it is a brand new animal to you and you know nothing about any of it. So if it seems kind of simple to you, you may want to move forward if you know a little bit about it. If not, then this is the video that you need to be watching. Now, you'll notice that this is the spindle. The spindle is connected to your Z-axis. Your Z-axis moves up and down, or basically in and out of the material. Now your X-axis is right here, and this goes towards the wall, in this case, towards the wall and then away from the wall. So it basically goes across the cue. This is your Y-axis. This goes lengthways of your cue. And this is your fourth axis, or rotary axis. And this is what rotates your cue. This is your controller, or control box. And this is what tells the CNC machine what to do. Basically, it powers it up, it controls the movements of it, and it is the main source of receiving the G-code information. Now, with that being said, you have to have what's called a post processor. And the post processor, in my case, I use a software called Mach 3. Mach 3 interprets the G-code produced by your CAD-CAM software. And your CAD-CAM software, which I will get into also in a little bit, your CAD-CAM software is where all the magic happens. That is where you do all of your design work, and it's where the G-code is automatically generated for the most part. And of course, you have to decide whether you want to use a desktop or a laptop when running your machine. Now, there are pros and cons to running laptop versus desktop. I have ran into issues with a laptop and a USB cable. I use desktop only when I run my machines, and I, if at all possible, use a parallel port, a 25 pin parallel port. These are going to be found in your older systems, and they're generally going to be running either XP up to Windows 10, Windows 11. I find that a parallel port transmits voltage more consistently. And the thing about that is you have to have a constant 5 volts running to your machine at any stage that it is on. If you do not, then your machine will do what's called losing steps. And that is basically where the machine forgets where it is. Okay, and that's the whole premise behind a CNC machine. When you set your 0 or your home location, as long as you don't lose any steps due to power, or the lack of power rather, as long as you set your home location, wherever you go on that machine, it will be able to remember where home is. So if you ever had to go back to 0, you just press go home and it takes you back to 0. If you ever lose power or get a power surge, or you're not getting a constant 5 volts to the machine, then the machine will literally forget where it's at and you'll have to start all over again. Remember, this is a computer operated machine. It only knows and can only do what you tell it to. So it's as smart as you make it. Now, the last thing that well, two more things actually. If you look at the far left over here, and this is a good idea based on the topic I just covered with the power loss, you need to have something that's called a UPS, or a uninterrupted power supply. You can get these online, Office Depots, things like that, at a pretty fair price. I think the one right here, it's 1500 watts, and that is more than enough for this machine. It'll give you about an hour, hour and a half of power outage to run by itself. You can get that one for about 190 bucks, I think. It's well worth the investment. There's nothing worse, and trust me, I've been there before multiple times. There is nothing worse than having a program running, such as cutting a point or a pocket, or cutting out the inlays, and then you get a power surge. Because at that point, the machine stops, it shuts down, it forgets where it's at, and you have to start all over again. So to avoid that, you want to get a UPS. Again, that is an uninterruptible power supply, and you connect the entire machine to that, and in the event that you lose power, the machine keeps running off of the battery in the UPS. And now the final thing, if you look up top, you will see basically it's just an airbrush motor. You have to have some sort of airflow to blow the chips away from your cutting area, because when you're cutting, your end mill needs to have evacuation, and the airflow that's blown into the pocket or part that you're cutting ensures that the area stays clean and chip free. The cleaner it can stay, it being the pocket or the part you're cutting on, the cleaner it stays, the more accurate your final product will be. Now, let's go ahead and cover the CNC lathe while we're doing this. And then we'll go back into the office and get some final discussion and prepare for the next episode and the next step. So let me get rearranged and we'll talk about the CNC lathe. Okay, here we are at the CNC lathe. Earlier, we just looked at the CNC mill. Now, I need to explain the differences between the two, and basically what each one of them will do for you. And if you look at starting from the right hand side, you have your control box. It's the silver box on top, and in this case I have a lay down desktop, and that is sitting underneath of the controller. And then of course you have your monitor up there, and it's showing Mach 3 at the moment. On the left hand side of that, you have a little bitty black box. Well, it's not really little bitty, but that is the control box for the spindle, and the spindle being your headstock on a lathe. Now, about the machine. In this case, this particular machine is originally produced by Todd Schultz. It is a Mid-America CNC machine. Now, of course, I made a lot of conversions and modifications to it, and he currently doesn't offer this machine any longer. Starting from the left, you have your headstock, and then you have the motor on the back that drives the headstock, and that motor is connected to the black box that I mentioned earlier, and that black box does nothing in the world but turn the headstock. Then you have your tailstock, much just like a regular lathe. You have a tailstock, and that is pretty standard tailstock. This is a drilling tailstock, nothing special about it. And then you have your cross slide, and you'll notice that there's a router mounted on top of the cross slide. And the main difference between a CNC lathe and a CNC mill is that there is no Z-axis. The height always stays the same. You only have 3 axes of rotation. One is your rotary axis, which in this case is constant, non-stop, non-adjustable. You change the speed only. It is not controlled by the computer. And again, that is in essence your headstock. Then you have on your cross slide, you'll see 2 knobs. On the left, that controls your X movements, which is toward the wall and away from the wall, or across the machine and away from the machine. And then on the right knob controls your Z axis. Remember, I said there is no Z-axis, and what I meant by that is there's no up and down. Now on a CNC mill, your Z-axis controls your spindle height. On a CNC lathe, your Z-axis controls your what would normally be Y movements across the cue, or across the shaft, or across the wood blank. It goes up and down the machine. So don't let it get confusing between the CNC mill Z-axis and the CNC lathe Z-axis. They do not mean the same thing. Now, some of the functions between the two I will cover once I get back in the office, and I would rather you see me for that part. That is the basics of both machines, or both types of machines. And give me just a minute, I'll get back in the shop, in the office, and we'll continue the discussion, and I'll tell you the differences between the two and the pros and cons. So give me just a minute. Okay, we're back in the office now. I have given you a brief description of both machines, both the CNC mill and the CNC lathe. Now I'd like to discuss some of the major differences between the two and what you can accomplish with the two. On the CNC mill, that is intended for you to perform actions such as cutting CNC points, cutting CNC inlays, doing inlays in the ring work, inlays in the handle. It is intended for cutting the pockets and the parts. On a different part of the machine, you would cut your parts. You can cut ring billets, and technically you could add something called a spinning station to the CNC mill, and that kind of gets away from the 4th axis, and it provides the same thing that a CNC lathe does that I mentioned earlier. It will give you a constant rotation because a stepper motor is not designed to constantly turn in one direction at a high RPM. So with that in mind, you would want to, if you wanted to combine both the CNC lathe and the CNC mill together into one machine, you would want to have what's called a spinning station. Now, Ed Peterson with EAPQs, he utilizes a spinning station on his machine. He actually, the machine I just showed you as far as the CNC machine, that's the same one that he has, but he has his own modifications on it as well. And of course, I produce one for sale as well called a Q-Demon. Now, if you add the spinning station to your CNC mill, it's basically just a headstock that continuously rotates with a separate power supply. You can change the speed, and at that point, then you can do shafts and butt tapering. Now, also on the CNC mill, you can cut your ring billets and things like that. It's pretty unlimited what you can do with a CNC mill in the Q world. Now, with the CNC lathe, there's a considerable amount of differences and limitations. With a CNC lathe, a dedicated CNC lathe, what the purpose of having that would be in the Q world would be to cut shaft tapers and taper butts. That's the main principle or purpose of having a CNC lathe for key making. Tapering shafts and tapering butts. Now, with that being said, there are other things you can do, and I do as well. You can program your CNC lathe to cut perfect tenons for your ferrules and your joint collars and the butt sleeve construction and things of that nature. So it is not, a CNC lathe is not intended for, nor will it ever allow you to make a vertical cut or penetration, which would basically be used for cutting points and inlays. It will not do inlays. I showed you two different machines because that's how I like to use them. I keep them dedicated to themselves. I have one dedicated CNC mill, I have one dedicated CNC lathe. I do this because that way I can keep them both running. On one machine, I'm producing shafts and making tapers on butts of Qs. On the CNC mill, I'm busy cutting points and inlays and things like that. So production-wise, it really helps out to have two separate models or two separate machines. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, you can combine both of those into one machine. The only difference is you would want a CNC mill and you would want a spinning station that consists of another tailstock and a headstock that rotates with its own power. The next video, again, I'm trying to take this very slowly with you guys. It is very detailed, it's very involving, and there's a lot to learn. So I think the best approach is to take it literally step by step. I'm gonna treat this with baby hands coming into it, and I'm gonna tell you or try to make an attempt to teach you very slowly and in micro steps. Okay, now the next video that I do will be one that starts to show the post processor and the CAD CAM software and what the purpose of those two programs are. And I think that would be the logical next step. And then of course the next step would be beginning to set things up and use them. This is going to be a multi-step video series, but the good thing is that they will always be there. You can always come back and rewatch them as many times as you need to. And you can always ask me questions directly in the comments or on my next live stream, which I have every Monday at 10 o'clock. At least I do for now. If you find this information useful to you, please take the time to subscribe if you haven't already, and like it, share it, and leave us a comment. Well, me, because I'm probably going to be the primary one doing these videos on this CNC stuff. Ed, I spoke with him last night. He is going to show a couple things with CNC, but he's pretty much left that up to me to teach you guys, which I don't mind. I enjoy it. It's to me, I think that's the best part of it, is CNC work. But then again, I'm a damn nerd, so um, either way, the intention of the video series is to introduce you to CNC, teach you as best as I can how to use the CNC lathe and or the CNC mill, and to help guide you along the way. Now, I may end up, I can't guarantee this, but I may end up having dedicated one-on-one sessions upon request. And if so, you will be charged for that. But if it's required or requested, I will set up a one-on-one conversation with you via telephone. I will charge you by the hour if needed. But I do think that these videos should be all you really need, at least to get you going. Now, again, that wraps this one up. If you found it useful and you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so. And like, share, comment, and we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot, guys.